hour of this broadcast. Now, as earlier stated, the 4th Annual Legislative Summit is underway in Kisumu on its day 2. We now want to join our political affairs reporter Murimi Mwangi, who is on standby with Homa Bay Senator Moses Ojwang with an update. Murimi, what do you have for us this day?
Excuse me, sorry. Good morning and thank you so much for joining us once again. Day 2 of the 4th Legislative Summit here in Kisumu. The focus this time being on integrity and governance, and the focus, of course, besides that being issues about how to facilitate the harmonization of legislation from the county assemblies, the 47 of them, and the Senate, given that these are the two critical institutions that are mandated with the task of oversight of county governments. I will be engaging two senators, one of them being the chair of the Senate Public Accounts and Investments Committee. He also happens to be the Homa Bay Senator Moses Ojwang, as well as nominated Senator Agnes Zani. Perhaps if they could just join us here. Now, just yesterday in the speeches that were made here, including that one that was made by the Devolution CS on behalf of the President, there was insistence on the need for these two institutions to harmonize what they do to facilitate better oversight over the counties. What do you think is the lacking gap when you look at what has been happening in the 6 years of devolution?
I think the conceptualization of devolution now and really understanding what is going on is becoming clearer by the day. And one of the issues that is coming out clearly also is that there is autonomy. You know, legislative houses are supreme in their own nature. You cannot, for example, go and legislate on behalf of another house. So each of the houses has to do exactly this. And I think the sort of synergy that has been there between county assemblies and the Senate is that we can, for example, pinpoint certain issues, or we can come into a discussion about certain issues, but final decisions have to be made within the county assemblies themselves. And a lot of this has begun to happen, but the system to do this and put it in place is still being formulated and getting better and better. For example, now at the Senate, we're looking at another process which will be very, very functional, which is looking at the control of budget, a schedule of how money has gone to the counties, the projects, and then together with the county assembly, being able to oversight in real time. Because now what we do is that we get the report from the Auditor General and we're doing a post-mortem of how money has been spent. It's already been spent. We want to be able in real time and together also with the county assembly members, be able to oversight those projects. So I think if you look at the first phase of devolution and this phase of devolution, where we are now, we've had a problem, for example, of the legislative framework for certain issues within the counties. This has been put into place, and this is what we were discussing yesterday. You could see us engaging about coming up with legislative frameworks that are going to be put into place. One very important proposal that came from the discussions yesterday, that we should have this legislative summit turn into a committee or have become a statutory body, so that whatever recommendations are carried from here can actually be implemented by this committee before we meet again in the next legislative.
Let me bring in Senator here before I come back to you. You chair the Public Accounts and Investments Committee. Senator here is talking about reports from the Auditor General. We see you and your committee in the Senate probe the audit queries that are therein. But there's also concern that the first court of call when you're doing oversight on counties is the county assemblies. Yet the county assemblies are not involved in, questioning these queries from reports of the Auditor General. So how do you cascade it down to, the 47 different grassroots legislative, platforms in these county assemblies? Is there, a workable modalities around which what you do at the Senate can be cascaded down to the 47 different parliaments, so to speak, but in the counties?
Thank you. As a Senate, we are very conscious that primary oversight is undertaken at the county assembly level. It is the members of county assembly that have the day-to-day responsibility of planning, budgeting, appointing, and doing oversight of counties. The Senate comes in at a secondary level. And when the Senate is looking at the Auditor General's reports, it's supposed to look at them from a different perspective. Instead of the Senate running after receipts and invoices and vouchers, we want to take a different view of looking at value for money for the funds that are sent to counties. Already, we are in conversation with the Auditor General that we now need the Auditor General to be generating performance audits rather than financial statement audits. We believe that financial statement audits are best treated at the county assembly. Then the Senate would now focus on impact of interventions at the counties through performance audits. But it is also noteworthy that we have now put up a schedule of appearances for counties to appear before the Senate. And if you look at the schedule we've put up, we will be scrutinizing the Auditor General's report for 2017-2018. In other words, we want to stop doing the post-mortem, the mortician role that we've been doing in the past. I know that many county assemblies are still struggling to come up to date as far as consideration of those reports are concerned. But this time round, we have seen an improvement, even in the kind of opinions that the Auditor General has given. For example, we have 2 counties that have been given unqualified opinions. That is the county of Makueni and one other county. We have seen a reduction in the number of counties that have got adverse opinions and disclaimers. 5 years or 6 years down the line, we are able to do an analysis and take a view. And we are contemplating proposing, in line with the Constitution and the PFM Act, that counties that have consistently had adverse and disclaimers, those are counties that have had persistent material breaches of the PFM Act. And this time round, we are considering making a proposal to the Cabinet Secretary to stop funds to those counties until systems and procedures are put in place to correct the anomalies.
Now, very interesting speeches were made yesterday, Senator, and I want to pick on one which was made by Majority Leader in the Senate, Kipchumba Murkomen, and this to do with intimidation of members, not just in Parliament, but also in the county assemblies on the basis of how they vote when matters are brought before plenary. And I know you've held a senior position in a political party before. So how do you balance between, the autonomy of these legislative institutions and party politics, because it's happening nationally, and I know you're aware it's happening. Perhaps very briefly as we hand back to Nairobi.
Thank you, and I think you've used the key word there, and that it's a political process. And what I think we need to look at is to look at the overall picture, and this is why we have this summit exactly, so that we tell ourselves, despite the politics, despite the disagreements, despite the situation, what is the agenda? In sociology, we always have consensus and conflict. It's a nature of society. At any one time, there's consensus and there's conflict, but there's synergy towards achieving a specific end. And our end as legislative houses is to come up with proper legislation. Yesterday, we came across and agreed on a raft of legislation. Most of this legislation is already underway. In fact, I think from what has been reported, it's a bit erroneous that we haven't passed 30 pieces of legislation. Already, 6 of these have already been passed. We have just started. Many of these are already at second reading, and these are being progressed. So I think the main idea is to really be able to put legislative framework, and then we need to move to the next stage, and the next stage is sanctions. And this is what Senator Kajwang is talking about, because we know in developed society that have been able to move forward, there have been levels of sanctions. You need to be able to know that if I don't do 1, 2, 3, 4, this is going to be the repercussion. I think when we get there, we're going to be able to instill a level of...
Perhaps as you end up, Senator.
Yes, a level of maybe discipline and direction, which will help us, even despite our political position, in our own interest. Because this goes at different levels. You've heard that, for example, nominated senators have been removed from committees. It's a power struggle, and this is real because it is politics, but we can do that within a framework of development and the success of devolution, which is the main story in this whole chapter.
Nominated Senator Agnes Zani, as well as Homa Bay Senator Moses Kajwang, who also chairs the Public Accounts and Investments Committee at the Senate. Back to you in studio.
Murimi Mwangi, they are just giving us an update of the Legislative Summit Day 2, speaking to nominated Senator Agnes Zani and Homa Bay Senator Moses Kajwang. We'll be giving